Good morning and welcome to Australian Indian Radio's daily Facebook live updates. And hey, it's wonderful to see you once again. And how are you doing this morning? Yes, it is 28th of July already, and it's a wonderful day out there, as you can see behind me. That scene never ceases to amaze me. I'll try and change the camera, angle every day to capture a slightly different view if we can. But it is wonderful to see that it's happening that way. Well, let's take a very, very quick look at what's today going to be like. So the rest of Tuesday, by the way, is a very good day for us. As you know, Tuesday nights we finish up at the Gayatri Mandir, and if you have the time, please come and join us for our prayer sessions and the bhajans there, and you'll catch yours truly on the tabla. Well, so the rest of today is going to be maximum of 22 degrees, mostly sunny with a 0% chance of rain. Brisbane area mostly sunny. Winds are westerly, 15 to 20 kilometers an hour, increasing to 15 to 25 kilometers, later in the morning. Well, sun protection is recommended from about now till about 1:20, and the UV protection today is a little bit less, so it's moderate and 3, so which is pretty good news. But still, please always take precaution if you're going out into the sun. As we know, regardless of the color of your skin, you still burn. It still causes the rays, the harmful rays will still cause and do the damage to the skin. So you always be very, very careful. Now, looking at the confirmed cases so far, I'm talking about coronavirus, of course, obviously, and that's what we are sort of doing at this point in time. So confirmed cases in Queensland, 1,076, and recovery is 1,063. And with the deaths at this point in time, 6 recorded in Queensland. While Australia, the scenario changes quite dramatically here, because we have we have 14,935 confirmed cases, 9,311 recoveries so far, and the death so far is 161. That's 6 more which was added in the last few days. And of course, we know about that case. We will be talking about that in a little while. The baby who is tested positive as well. And worldwide, 16 million, as we talked about the numbers going up, yes, is a whooping 16.3 million. And recovery is sitting at 9.43, with the deaths recorded is 650K, which is quite big and quite alarming when we look at all these numbers. Well, as we know that everyone's talking about this pandemic, and as to seeing what's happened so far and why and how it came about, and everyone, of course, has their own opinions and own views on that. But what does AJ say on that? What's his take on this? Well, when we talk about AJ, who? Alan Jones, I'm talking about from Sky News. Yes, he is now at Sky News and the pandemic and his way of looking at this pandemic and what is he saying. Let's have a listen to this report.
Tell me, am I the only one who is sick and tired of hearing with monotonous repetition the latest bloody number of people who've tested positive to coronavirus? I'm not stupid, but I've got no idea what it means other than if you increase the testing, you're bound to find more people who test positive. But the reality is, in 129 days since this alarmism began, we've had 128 deaths in Australia. Is this a pandemic? Can someone please tell us, and if they can't, why can't they? What are the ages of these people? What pre-existing conditions did these 128 people have? When government breathlessly announces how many cases, new cases, why don't they tell us how many are mild? Why don't they tell us how many have recovered? Why don't they tell us how old the people were who died? And why don't they tell us that the bulk of Australians, in the Prime Minister's own words, are not at risk? The fact is, Daniel Andrews' premiership has been smashed. He should have already walked. His response to the virus, and he's not on his own, has been woeful and alarming. Labor is clearly petrified about the evidence coming out of this inquiry. You will recall I mentioned yesterday that Tony Neal QC told the inquiry it may even be the case that every case of COVID-19 in Victoria in recent weeks could be sourced to the hotel quarantine program. Listen to this.
It may even be that every case of COVID-19 in Victoria in recent weeks could be sourced to the hotel quarantine program.
Well, now we learn that some of the security guards who worked at these hotels were hired through WhatsApp messages. One who's spoken publicly said she was rung and asked if she'd like to work at this place. She sensibly replied she didn't even know who they were or what the company was. There was no tender process for any of this. The Andrews government just contacted private security operators, guard the hotel quarantine guests. It is clear that they did more than guard them, if you know what I mean. One person hired from WhatsApp said there were no infection control protocols. She and others received no training. They were not even told what training they had to do. Just put on a mask and whack on some gloves, they were told. No training on how to use protective personal equipment. Some parts of the hotel had no sanitisers. And then she was told at the end of the first day, bring your own personal protective equipment tomorrow. She rightly said she didn't want to work at a place that was so unsafe. This scandal is wholly the property of the Andrews government. We are living through a sort of medical tyranny. Orders are blurted out to us every other day. No one can explain why we did not from the outset focus on people at risk. But those not at risk have been treated the same as those at risk. And now we keep calling out clusters. This achieves nothing except economic and social destruction. As Tony Abbott rightly said last week, one issue is completely unaddressed. The extent to which saving lives should or should not take precedence over preserving the economy. We talk about disease detectors, for God's sake. But not one leader has ever cited World Health Organisation figures that 99% of the cases are mild. People are writing to me in abject distress. They can't see their family, the children can't go to school, they can't leave the house, and now they have to wear a mask. Do these politicians have any idea what they're doing? Do they understand they are hurting the very people they say they're trying to help? A woman wrote to me, she'd just been to the shops. She went to pay with a $5 note. She was told, we don't take cash, otherwise I'll have to wash my hands. We're living in a society overtaken by fear, a fear cultivated by the political response to what is not a pandemic. There are 100,000 people in Albury-Wodonga. How'd you like to be one of them? One side of the border functions, the other doesn't. Families are split, business is stuffed. Decisions are made in capital cities by people who wouldn't have a clue what it's like in the regions.
People who won't have a clue what it's like. That's Alan Jones for you, and this scaremongering tactics which he talks about, because as we know, he's quite vocal and he'll come out. One of the points that he made there, that why didn't we do a lot of things from the very beginning? There was so many measures that could have been put in place right in the very beginning, and that would have seen a slightly different result. But unfortunately, that has not been the case, and we are faced with this scenario now that we have to now deal with the best as we can. So now looking at all these cases and what's happened, so the breaking news that's come across is that the aged care heartbreak Sydney Black Lives Matter protest will go ahead, and visiting parents may have infected the newborn at Melbourne Hospital. So once again, we cannot stress enough that as it is the case that everyone needs to go and visit people in the hospitals, and of course when there is a funeral that's happening, people are, we have to be there. No, you don't have to be there. You can pass on your condolences remotely as well. Have to look at the situation, as we saw in that funeral procession where people got infected as well, and we have seen live footage of some of the video footage of some of the funeral processions where social distancing just does not happen. So it is very important that we do take these precautions. The parents of a neonatal ward in Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital may have infected a newborn baby with coronavirus, health authorities have just revealed. The baby under 3 weeks is one of the 4 confirmed cases of COVID-19 that have emerged in a cluster of the hotel's neonatal intensive care unit. And it's feared a parent of another child who visited the ward when they were not sympathetically could have been behind the outbreak. So there you go. So that's the case. So, it is customary in many customs that you do go and visit when there's a newborn and other kind of things. But once again, precaution really needs to take place. Well, last night there was a meeting of QMC. QMC is the Queensland Multicultural Council, and amongst many other things on the agenda was the Black Lives Matter protest, which is scheduled to go ahead today. So, despite all the warnings and the conditions, and the Premier there might have something else to say, and, as people say, why don't you just throw the book at these people? But, they are quite adamant that they will go ahead as planned. So, Black Lives Matter protest is expected to go ahead in Sydney today, despite the organisers being warned twice about the public health risk. The Supreme Court made a ruling that this event is illegal, with the federal government saying the most dangerous act anybody could do during a pandemic. Despite this, the protesters are still meeting at Sydney's Domain around 12 p.m. today to hold a peaceful protest picnic. And that is what they say. And the organizer, we will watch him later in the show today. He says there's nothing stopping people coming into the Domain and having a picnic or having a lunch. So protest organizer Paddy Gibson has taken a dig at Queensland government's condemnation of the event, claiming that it is politically motivated. Why? He refers to the Premier. This government is giving exceptions to commercial operations to allow thousands of people gathering indoors, including major shopping centres, Mr. Gibson said. But why not the protest? Why can't people gather there? Now, as we know, many places have now allowed face-to-face meetings, like our QMC meeting last night was face-to-face, but was against all the precautionary measures need to be taken. People need to fill in the register, who's there, all the contact details need to be put in, what time you entered, what time you left, who else was there, and of course the seating plan has to be submitted that everyone will be seated so far apart. The hand sanitizers need to be in place, so all the safety measures need to be done. When you're holding a function in a public place, in a public domain, how do you control that? How do you register all the people who have come in? Of course, we have those apps that are there. Even with those apps, the tracing, it is very hard to trace all the people. So when there is an indoor organized function or an event, you can actually monitor who's coming. You have a registration process. You have the sanitizers there. You can have a testing situation there as well, where people are tested for temperature, obviously, before they go in. So, but when you hold that similar thing, even at a smaller scale, in an open air public place, you have got absolutely no control over who comes, and you don't need thousands of people, in fact, to spread the disease, as we have seen in that case of that newborn baby. You need one. So all you need is one person to come in that place and could spread the disease. So, it is a question of being very careful onto the terms and as to what needs to be done in those kind of circumstances. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, you are listening to Australian Indian Radio's Daily Facebook live updates, and as we know, these days, as in any other news channel, the most of the coverage and the talk is all around the coronavirus and the cases, and how each and every country is trying to deal with the situation. Some have done better than the others, and in hindsight, many could have done better. But obviously, when decisions are made, there is always a lot of things. The 2 points that Alan Jones made there, and he referred to Tony Abbott, was that what do we guard first, the economic prosperity or the health situation? To me, health always comes first. So you need to look after the health and well-being of the general public first. And of course, economic viability is, of course, very necessary, because without that, people will not be able to survive, and everyone needs to safeguard that as well. But safeguarding people's health, to me, it comes first. Well, right now, let's go and have a quick listen to the two messages from our Prime Minister. The first one is on job planner. We have had job keeper, job seeker. Now the new terms coming out, job planner. And after that, we will look at his take on the version on aged care. As we know, aged care has been taking a lot of space in the news arena at the moment, because there's so much talk about the clusters that happened in Victoria, and of course there's the debate about aged care, whether these elderly people are better off at home, being in the care of their loved ones and being looked after by the ones who really care for them and love them, as opposed to being in a place where you have trained professionals who are trained to look after people in these special circumstances. But does that always happen? Are they really looked after? Do they feel lonely? How are they looked after? Of course, there are situations where they cannot stay at home, so they need to go into these aged care facilities just to be looked after and making sure that the specialist services are there. How are they monitored? What safety measures are in place, and what is the attitude of the workers in there towards these people. So the first of all is the job planner scheme, and then Prime Minister will address the aged care facilities.
JobMaker plan is designed to look at the post-COVID recovery and to set us up for that post-COVID recovery. We're about creating jobs. Jobs is the way out economically for Australia. This is an Australian plan based on Australian values, based on Australian challenges and Australian solutions. And that will continue to guide our efforts, practically dealing with the problems that we face, bringing the best minds together, bringing the country together to get behind the effort to ensure that we recover strongly from the COVID pandemic. We are still very much in the midst of it. We are still very much in the fight over it. Against this pandemic and the impact that it is having. But we also have a very strong plan to see us recover strongly on the other side.
Authorised by S. Morrison, Liberal Party, Canberra.
And that is quite a plan that's happening on there. And we've got a question here from Deepak Gupta, which is a very good question. Deepak, I must say that, I have maintained that many times that the high wages and difficult labour laws will ensure that business remain viable and have edge over international manufacturing. Now, that is exactly what I've been saying for quite some time, and I quite agree with your points there, Deepak. Australia has such a vast land, and there's so much that could be done there, but the economic viability is that, people just cannot look at the closure of all our manufacturing plants, our car industry. That's no more, because we are unable to compete on the international level. Look at anything that's manufactured here in Australia, price-wise, as compared to, I'm not talking about the quality-wise, of course, we can do much better than many other international countries. But, the fact of the matter remains that, the cost of doing business here in Australia is very high. Now, coming from, when I was in the construction industry, when we were quoting for jobs, the labour components, many occasions, and if you're just looking at the houses, building the houses, the labour component always was the highest, much above the material cost of the housing. So these are some of the very challenging questions, and and thank you very much for that question. But right now, let's look at the message from our Prime Minister, and this time on aged care, and that is another area where people are very passionate and they really want to talk about aged care. And let's see what the federal government's plans are on aged care.
National COVID Commission and its reformation as a Prime Minister's advisory body, an advisory board. But before I do that, I just wanted to make a COVID-19 situation, updating on my statements after the National Cabinet meeting on Friday. Over the weekend and today, the Emergency Response Centre has been stood up in relation to aged care that brings together all the key agencies involved in supporting the aged care sector at a state and at a federal level. And that's being headed up by the National Chief Nurse, Ms McMillan, and we thank them for the work they've been doing, particularly over the weekend. the situation in Victoria. Of course, the Premier will be updating Victorians and the country more broadly on those matters in his regular press conference. But just to suffice to say that the federal government continues to provide every support, the increasing deployment of ADF personnel across a broad range of tasks, including, as foreshadowed, the door-to-door operations, right through to the tracing supports, logistics command support, support and testing centres, and that will continue. It's important to understand that the challenges, and they are significant in the aged care sector, are a reminder that when community transmission occurs with COVID-19, the aged care sector will always be impacted. That is certainly the experience we've seen in other countries. When you have problems in aged care, it is a function of the community transmission. Now, this is an important point to note because it behoves all of us. If we want to protect the most vulnerable in our community, that's why it's so important that those of us who may be in a less vulnerable position are continuing to follow the advice, performing the safe distancing and other practices about getting tested, about remaining isolated when you're a close contact. All of this is incredibly important because when community transmission takes place, it is inevitable that it will find its way into the more vulnerable parts of our community, and the aged care community is certainly one of those. Now, one of the key things that are being done in the aged care sector currently is transferring people who have contracted COVID into hospital facilities, and we're making use of the private hospitals agreement that we put in place some months ago to free up beds in the private hospital area so we can transfer people out of those facilities into those beds, and we're working closely with the Victorian State Government about that process. I was in contact earlier today with the Premier on those issues. The other part of it is ensuring that the infection control management in aged care facilities is being closely monitored. We have already put some 1.5 million masks into aged care facilities, and about that number and a bit more are also further going into aged care facilities. That's part of a broader provision of personal protective equipment that has been deployed in Victoria. I should stress that the Commonwealth is not the only level of government that provides PPE material into the health system. Of course, the state governments also do that, and in fact are the primary providers of that equipment into healthcare facilities in their jurisdiction, but the national stockpile is being drawn upon to support their efforts to ensure that's in place. It is vital that in those aged care facilities those infection control procedures are being followed. The Commonwealth put in place training for infection control in relation to COVID-19 in recent months, and it's a matter now of ensuring that those infection control procedures are being adhered to strictly in those facilities. Because obviously in aged care facilities you're dealing with the most vulnerable members of our community, and that is where you see the most awful of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. That is where the loss of life in particular occurs, far more significantly than any other part of the community. Although it is true to say that others who are younger can be susceptible, and it can prove fatal in some circumstances, as we have already seen. So all effort is being deployed to ensure that we're doing what is necessary in the aged care sector. We also...
So as the Prime Minister has just said, that everything's being done, or what could be done into that aged care sector, and providing, control over those most vulnerable in our community, as he has said. Now, as the President of Queensland Multicultural Council, I have to make a public statement. It is about the Black Lives Matter protest that's happening in Sydney, or planned to happen, or the planned meeting at about midday today. And now, while we, as a council, as a multicultural council, support the movement, support what's being done, we do not support the manner in which it is being done and the timing of that as well. You are putting forward an agenda, which is okay, which is everyone's right. It is your democratic right to put forward your agenda, your thoughts and your feelings, but not at the stake of others, not by putting at risk other people and their lives. And so it's the manner. place and timing of the protest that Queensland Multicultural Council does not support and opposes and condemns. But we are with the movement. We do support. There are so many things that we can be doing together, to push this agenda forward, which is very, very important. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on and take a very quick commercial break before we go into the news. But I think just looking at the time, I think we'd cross over to Victoria Fest before going into that commercial break.
First things first, there are 8,696 coronavirus cases in Victoria. That's 532 new. There are 245 Victorians in hospital and 44 of those are receiving intensive care. We have a total number of tests at 107,588 tests results processed yesterday. Obviously the day before was a very, very significant number in the mid to high 40,000s. I'm very sad to have to inform you that there are 6 further Victorians who have passed away as a result of this infectious virus, this global pandemic. A female in her 90s, a female in her 80s, a man in his 80s, a female in her 70s, a male in his 70s, and a male in his 50s. 5 of those 6 deaths are connected to outbreaks in aged care. Beyond that, there are 4,542 total active cases, 683 active cases connected in some way to aged care, and around 400 health workers who are active cases as of the situation report first thing this morning. The key message today for every single Victorian, regardless of where they work and regardless of where they live, you simply can't go to work if you have symptoms. You can't go to work if you feel sick even mildly. You've got to come forward and get tested.
And ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time for that commercial break.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 सैंडगेट रोड, बुंदल, क्वींसलैंड। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, रियल एस्टेट इज अवर वर्ल्ड।
And it definitely is the world, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, I'm just looking at the time as well. So we'd go to India, and 2 news from India. One is the Invercargill Vijay Diwas. So let's take a very quick look at that because it is a very, very significant day. So the 21st Kargil Vijay Diwas. Hard to believe it's already 21 years. So 26th of July is when we celebrate Kargil Divas. And right now, India has taken delivery of those Rafale aircraft, the much talked about aircraft from France.
In Bordeaux for the takeoff of 5 Rafale jets that are flying to India today. Our Air Force pilots tell us that these are extremely swift, nimble, versatile, and very deadly aircraft. You might call them, they're both beauty and beast. They are superb flying machines being flown by the best pilots in the world. We'd like to thank Dassault for delivering the aircraft on time, the French Air Force and the French government for all the support they've provided. This is going to add a great deal of strength to our air power and defense preparedness, but it is also a powerful symbol of the strategic partnership between India and France. So our pilots I've just spoken to them, they are very excited. They are very proud to be flying these machines to India today. It's going to be a long flight, and it is a remarkable symbol of their professionalism, their endurance, and the skills that they have acquired during the training, that they'll be able to do this with mid-air refueling and just a single stop en route to India, which is actually quite a long distance. We have bid them safe landing in India.
And safe landing in India after all the controversies that took place when the contract was awarded to the French company. As we know, it became the center of a big political drama in India. But it's good to see that it's come to fruition and the planes are being delivered. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're fast running out of time, so let's have a very quick look at the upcoming events before we finish off for today. Sri Kamaski Ekaswaram Dham and their programs which have now begun. Bala Sanskar Kendra online Hindu Dharma classes for children. And of course, Bhavan Puja Kendra and BSK Annual Cup. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there's any function or event that you'd like to see on this program, we quite happily bring them on. If there's any topic that you'd like to discuss and talk on, if you want to come and join us live, we can bring you live, via our video link or through the phone, or you can come into the studios. So it is all, of community interest, and the topics that we would like to discuss on here is always of community interest, and there's always some points that people have which we could miss. There's some wonderful views and viewpoints of people out there within the community, which we would like to share with the wider community, with everyone out there, and look at those kind of points and things that affect us and everyone within our community. Now, Gopio Queensland's India Day Fair, the dinner has been postponed, but they have been planning something different, which we will bring to you as soon as all the details come to hand. and of course Australian Multicultural Festival, the mental health. They're doing quite a lot of things online. I'd like to invite you to go online, have a look at all the things that they have to offer, and then have a look at some of the events that they are doing online, of course, virtually, and it is wonderful to see that. Join into that movement, and Vasan Srinivasan of Melbourne, as the head behind that, is doing a wonderful job, I'd say, and has made so many, and good to see Mustafa there with his hands up in the air. Sayog Brisbane, another collective organization of many groups working together as well. And of course, we have Selva Vinayak Temple, there's a temple happening there as well. Vedanta Center, all their programs, and of course, they do quite a lot online as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, it's been wonderful to, having your company here today. And as usual, if there is anything that you'd like to see or discuss, I'd like to bring that on and take it up with you, have a discussion with you. So thank you very much for joining in with us. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.